Slightly earlier time. Is it slightly earlier time this week? I think it is a slightly earlier time this week. No traitor. The trader isn't on. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Thirsty Thursday. It's the first. Hi, Erin. It's the 1st of February, which means it's the end of dry January, which means it's one of two things for a number of people. It's either, oh, this coming weekend is going to be an absolutely massive one, or this weekend is going to be just a little bit of a progression from December, from January. It's going to be an extension of January. Could it be an extension? Which are you? Is it an extension of January, or is it going to be bring it on? February is going to go balmy. Good evening, Tracy. Good evening, Edward, Geraldine McKeown. Tracy, hope you're all well. Yeah, what have we put? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Geraldine McKeown. This better be good. Oh, no pressure. Bloody hell. Hey. Well, yeah, it might not go where we think it's going. You never know where a share is going to go to. That's what these are amounting to, really, aren't they? These lives. It's like, hi, my name's Mark and I'm an alcoholic addict. Hi, I'm Mark, I'm an alcoholic addict. Hi, my name's Mark and I'm an alcoholic addict. Anyway, you don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it's going to go. And in fact, it's precisely, I can't speak. It's precisely for this kind of scenario, situation, moment, forum, that way back when I would have had to have had a drink to deal with it. Do you get that? Do you get that with any kind of, evening, Nicola, with any kind of public speaking or presentations or public performances and stuff like that? I've managed to, I mean, to be honest with you, all of the stuff that we've done with you guys has really helped me get on board with being able to do this without feeling as much anxiety. But my God, evening, Tim. Hi, Stacey. Yeah, these are those moments, aren't they? Nervy moments. It's like, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. And that's frightening, because one of the things that I think is a real truism about when I was drinking was I didn't know what was going to come out of my mouth then. And neither did half the people I was with. And it was a mess. So I thought we'd talk sex, drugs, drink, rock and roll. Well, I was going to do sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I wasn't a smack addict. I wasn't injecting heroin into my eyeballs. I'd seen people do that. I've smoked opium. I've smoked junk. I've eaten crack cocaine. I've smoked all sorts. Never injected anything, but drank all the way through. My drug taking was good question, Lee. Did drink settle your nerves? It did to begin with. First thought, second thought. First drink, second drink. One drink is never enough. One drink is never enough. Too many. I can never remember the phrase. Too many drinks is too many. One drink is too many. More drinks is never enough. Whatever it is. But did drink settle your nerves? There was always the idea that having a drink in your hand and feeling it coursing down your chest and into your esophagus, it kind of centered you for a moment. It fortifies you. I do think the best word in the making of any drink, like port or whatever, is fortification. Alcohol fortified me, and I think it does for so many people, which is why I think sex and the whole idea of how drink and drugs, the idea is that they all go hand in hand. Why do they all go in hand? Why do they all go hand in hand? Why do we say sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Because there's the idea that inhibitions go down. You do lots of cool shit, whacked out shit. You do unpredictable shit. You do terrible things like we talked about last week. You engage in risky behavior. You don't observe the boundaries, and you find yourself in all sorts of deep doo-doo. And I probably did find myself in deep doo-doo too. So, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, I always find it interesting. I always, one drink too much, 10 is never enough. Exactly. But for me, it was 10 was never, 10, 1 was never enough. There was never enough. There was never enough. Thank you, Michelle Hofstein. One drink too much, 10, never enough. And, you know, first thought, second thought. The first thought, second thought idea is, you know, what's the first thought of having a drink? But then what's the second thought? You know, what comes after that? You might have the first thought, which I think is what you're talking about, Lee. The first thought of having a drink is it will calm me down. It will ease me in. It will make me less boring. Well, one thing I can tell you about drugs for sure, let's put drink to the side, is too many drugs makes you the most boring motherfucker on the planet. Excuse that phrase, not particularly friendly, probably politically incorrect, and probably one has to say motherfucker, fatherfucker, everyone fucker. But you know what I'm saying? There's nothing more boring. If someone, the amount of times, and I'm going to be brutally honest about the things that I've done and taken and said. If you have too much cocaine, you will end up talking about the most boring things in the most intricate and intense detail. You are driven. You suddenly can mobilize an army in your head and your heart. You can rationalize the world. You can troubleshoot. You know, I'd be sitting in a pub troubleshooting the whole Israel-Gaza thing. Yeah, this, and that thing. But fundamentally, my drugging was an opportunity, Lee, back to your question about did it settle your nerves? It was a way of getting more alcohol in me. And so I was never really, I mean, don't get me wrong, when I was a student, I smoked load of spliff. And let's move through how these substances interact and interface with sex and romance and all that kind of stuff. And I made some notes. So look, here's the thing. So the first thing, I've talked about it before. I was in a very steady first relationship. I wasn't your kind of teenager that went snogging lots of people. I would run in the opposite direction. I was brought up in a very, what's the word? Very hippie, anything goes kind of environment. I'm going to sort of put it politely. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on. There was a lot of people with other people. It didn't matter who, it didn't matter how many, it didn't matter when, it didn't matter where or in what ways. And so there was a lot of that going on. And so in a weird way, my rebellion as a teen was to enter a pretty safe long-term first relationship with my girlfriend. And we were together from the age of 14 through to 17, 18, the summer of taking your A-levels and heading off to university. Now, in that time, obviously, I discovered drinking. And in that time, interestingly, I didn't actually drink. I was incredibly, you know, me and my first girlfriend, we were like siblings. She didn't know her dad. She hadn't got a dad. She just with her mum. So we connected on that. You know, there's some similarities, and so I didn't drink too much, and so I was very loyal, and it was a really good, meaningful relationship that we had. But then the drinking started to happen probably massively around 15, 16, and I've talked about that last week. I talked about that summer, come home late. One summer was particularly heavy where I was in a work environment where lots and lots of people in a summer job were just drinking. And this is, but bear in mind, this is before I went to university. And in that summer, I believe, I went on holiday with my first girlfriend's mum and her mum's boyfriend, Jeff. I like Jeff. He liked to play ping pong. He was a bit like Michael Caine. Anyway, I think I've talked about it somewhere else in one of our podcasts. On that trip, I drank whiskey. Now, bless her mum was lovely, but she drank a lot. And so we drank together. And I was a bit young to be drinking and all this kind of stuff. I'll answer that, Lucy Kitson. Ask me that again in a bit. And so we're on holiday. And anyway, on one of the nights, there was a bottle of whiskey, and this was the first. I hate whiskey. I never drank whiskey again. Well, I did. That's a lie. I drank everything again, but whiskey wasn't my thing. I didn't like it. It was too much. It was like, you know, when you're young and you drink, you go, oh, I'll never like that, and then eventually you like it. Bearing in mind, my first drinking experience was gin in class about the age of 14, but I wasn't like really drinking lots after that. It just wasn't available. It just wasn't around in that way. So I was on this holiday, got so stupidly drunk, I ended up with all my clothes were off. So I must be 16? All my clothes were off and I was running around and I was clearly, you know, just some kind of randy nutter. And I was just running around, bouncing off the walls, not knowing what I was doing, hitting all over the place. Her mum had to put me to bed. I thought I'd fallen in love with her mum. I thought I'd have fallen in love with Jeff. Everyone just knew that I was annihilated drunk and I didn't know what was going on. And they put me to bed and I passed out and I slept for about 16 hours. It was a mess. And of course, when you start to unpack your drinking history and you look back, you go, oh my God, that was a mistake. So quite early on, you know, I got a taste of the awfulness of losing any real rational sense of your sort of physical inhibitions, clothing inhibitions. You know how you get some people who get drunk and then they get they get their boobs out, or they get drunk and they pull their pants down and all that. I mean, I never really been into that. There was this, and I think I scared myself in that first instance. I was really scared because, you know, it would come back to me and I'd be like, oh my God, what was wrong with me? And they were all very jokey about it. And it was back in the day when no one really had, it was like Barry Keoghan running around at the end of Saltburn, but I was half the age and I was drunk. But rather than running, I was sort of running around, you know, like a soppy, floppy, literally, puppy. But it was a bit much. It was a bit much. It was too much, and it was a bit weird. Anyway, that didn't change. So 2 more years went on. Anyway, so I pretty much stayed. But I think something went into me. I thought, oh no. Oh no. Yeah, for a recovering alcoholic, I don't remember what happened beyond that. So there we go. Oh, look, what I worry about, Lucy Kitson, is how much I don't remember. But it's weird, isn't it? Because you have a memory of the well, you see the consequences because you wake up to them. You are always made aware of the consequences, and I do think it's a really interesting point that the memories and of blackout and all those kind of experiences are partially a reawakening of your craggy experience as you did something, as retold to you by, you know, friends or partners or whoever. It's like, you know, when Nadia was talking recently about a time she got really drunk and it was horrible for the girls and me and everything. But it's like she said, she doesn't remember half of it, but it comes back to her as it's fed back to her. And you've got to trust the people that are telling you this. So anyway, so first relationship, loyal. First time I got drunk was like that. It was too much, but also I'd known that at the age of 14 I'd got too drunk back then, but there was no sex, there was no kind of romance. But I was in a relationship and I kind of got confused. I was probably full of love for the whole scenario, for the whole kit and caboodle, and Jane and Jeff, you like to play ping pong and all that kind of stuff. Well, look at me, I'm going to run around with my donger out. Yay! Absolute douchebag. Then I went to college, and unfortunately, that relationship sort of fell to pieces in the summer that I went off to university. You know, that weird thing where you kind of know that you were childhood sweethearts, but I don't know. But if I'm honest, the other reason I went off was because I'd also had a fling as we were splitting up with another person. And I suddenly started to think, oh, I'm going to be free. I'm going to be off. I can do, without wishing to quote, was it the Soup Dragons? I'm going to do, no, was it Primal Scream? What we want to do. I want to get free. I want to get loaded. Literally, the lyrics in that song just spoke to me in a big way. And it was, you know, Ibiza, it was rave, it was all that kind of stuff. So headed off to college. And then when I was at college, that first year at college, I made up for all of the kind of, if you like, well-behaved teenage years. I made up for it in that first year of university. In that first year of university, I did not know what the hell was going on. All I do know was I was in Eliot College at the University of Kent, and this is a weird detail, but their halls of residence were designed by the guy who designed the H block, is it? The H prison? So really austere, concrete. I had a shared room with a chap called Neville, bless him. The point is, I was there for that whole 9 months of that academic year, and I didn't spend one night in the room with him. Not one night. And this was the start of what I think fed into my drinking. And I don't know if this is true for anyone else. I'm going to read out some of your comments in a moment. That fed into my drinking and into my boozing. And well, I hate to use the word womanizing because that suggests you're actually going out and purposefully laying traps to take advantage. I'm not saying for a minute, in all relationships that have an addictive or addict, or you've gone out and you've drunk and you're unfaithful, you could argue there's a womanizing aspect. I can genuinely look back and say, I just made huge, insensitive mistakes based and coming out of the fact that I was drinking too much and wasn't mindful of or considerate of the consequences. And I know that I broke hearts, and I'm not proud of that, and I upset people, and I betrayed people, and I dropped people in it. And it's all this kind of stuff that you have to get fiercely and fearsomely honest about, not just if you're in recovery saying you're an alcoholic wanting to stay sober, but I would argue even when you're hitting the 1st of February off the back of dry January, where perhaps you've smelt, you've felt, you've tasted a smidgen of something that feels nice and good and pure and clean, if not challenging, because let's not forget that wonderful quote. You know, the great thing about getting sober is you get your feelings back, but the difficult thing about getting sober is you get your feelings back. And, you know, the removal of all distractions and substances and addictions and compulsions and reliances is that you have to sit with self. And I would argue that we all struggle with sitting with self. And why not? That's not something to shoot us down about. So anyway, when I look back and go, oh, my womanizing year, you know, year and a half, if you like, at university, it wasn't quite like that. I was promiscuous. I had I had a lot of relationships. I had a lot of flings. It would more often than not lead to sex. And this was a brand new discovery. I remember being I remember being in one or two situations where, you know, I got together with someone at a party. They were drunk, I was drunk, and they wanted to do the doobry or do the deed in a scenario or a space that for me felt vulnerable or not right or anything like that. So they were actually even within that drunkenness, and you could argue this was partly, you know, having been brought up in a sort of strongly feminist environment, though the rules of that feminism were a bit blurry and a bit all over the place and a bit contradictory sometimes. But, you know, the idea, you know, the precepts and ideas of feminism had been instilled into me. So when I went out there, I remember being a very troubled, promiscuous guy, because it was like, I don't know if, am I a bad man for this? Am I a bad man for liking this? And, oh, am I a bad, but what I realized when I look back, I went into, I've just written it here. You know, when I went to college, I was free of monogamy from the relationship I was in. I was free of that loyalty that felt like a lot when I was young, and I was free of my rebellion having to be behaving well because my mum's life was so chaotic and odd and adventurous and weird and drinky, druggy, sexy, and all this kind of hippie lovey stuff. You know, my rebellion was to kind of be in an ordered relationship, if you like. So then I didn't have to do any of that. And so God, I went for hell for leather. But of course I went for it without really having any real comprehension of what the implications of this were. I'm just going to pause for a second and get some of your questions in. Tiggy, don't you wish you'd have stopped at the point so many times I should have stopped? I look back and I wish I had stopped. I mean, I'm at a curious point, Tiggy, now where I was saying to Nads, when you're coming up to 20 years sober, it's kind of weird. You need to, it's important for me to go back and do this, because by going back and traipsing through, Tim, I'm sure you would agree with this with 12 step, it's not about going back through it so that you get triggered and traumatized into a place of vulnerability that you could do anything wrong or relapse or anything like that. But you have to stay close to it. You need to stay close to why and how and what was going on for you, so that you don't sort of, in a sense, drift. You know, you don't get mission creep where you head off in a different direction. You suddenly feel you're all right. And you're like, oh, well, actually, euphoric recall kicks in and you go, actually, it wasn't that bad. I was having a right old time. And I think that's where midlife crises develop for a lot of men, is they think, I want to get back to that kind of free love, free drinking. But the thing is, when you do what you were doing, it's all well and good me doing it in my 20s. And when I look back, I bury my head in my hands and I cringe. And I tell you what you do as a father to daughters. I seriously try to remember everything, going back to whoever it was who asked, how do you remember it all? So that I can really be gemmed up and equipped to advise, to help, to give a genuinely honest insight into the not malicious thinkings of a young male or whatever, but the burgeoning, you know, birthing of desire, possibly though coupled with excessive drinking or excessive drugging. Tim Reed, this is why he sponsors, to go through the steps. Absolutely. I'd love to sponsor, but I don't feel, again, I go back to this thing, but I don't feel like I am a perfect 12-stepper. And so I would feel that I wasn't the right person to do it. Though what I would say, I don't know if you agree with this, Tim, is I've had some sponsors in 12-step fellowships that have been so off the rocks that I felt like I was keeping them on the straight and narrow. So I think maybe there's something to be learned from that. So yeah, that first year was really promiscuous. And, you know, when I look back, I think, here's the thing that I did from a very early stage. You know, there was one point where I think I was having a fling or a bit of a do or a thing going on with about 3 or 4 different young women on different corridors. And there was kind of a sense and an awareness. It wasn't free love and all that kind of stuff, but there was an awareness that this was going on. And it was kind of tolerant. And I think what I kind of tried to bake into how I was don't get under any illusions, or don't be under any illusions. But here's the thing. why did I go to this when I got drunk? I went to this because fundamentally, and I don't know if any of you, this relates to for any of you, drinking opened the sort of doors, the trap doors to that aching, whether it's justified or right or whatever, but this is what that aching, yawning, sad, lonely, fear of being alone, fear of not being with someone, fear of not being loved enough, and fear of the person in front of you not wanting you from a vanity perspective of, oh, what do you think of my pecs and all this kind of malarkey, and what do you think of my hair, but from a, I want you to want me. Wanting everyone to want you. There's a book called Perfume by Patrick Suskind, which is really interesting, which is about a guy trying to create a smell that creates almost love, but true love. If you feel true love, you end up devouring the person, or the person gets pulled to pieces in a cannibalistic frenzy. And so consequently, I was using drink, or drink would open the trapdoors, and I call them trapdoors because trapdoors suggest that you fall down into a kind of dark, dank place that you don't want to be in. It would open the trapdoors to low self-esteem, low self-worth, a fear of not being wanted, a fear of not being desired, a fear of being on my own. And what drink did, which is where it kind of couples, and I think this happens for a lot of people, it confuses you and makes you think that some kind of sexual activity or relationship or interaction is going to fill that hole. And that's where I think, I had a huge lot of compassion for, or understanding for, a lot of the people who came into rehab who were struggling with love addiction or codependency, because I think that's a huge part of it. I think you'll find that most addicts have a huge codependent aspect, or have an addiction to, relationships, or having serial relationships, or even an addiction to pornography and things like that, because you are seeking, you're actually, ironically, through something that's never going to deliver it, you're seeking a complete relationship. And it's really sad, and it's fruitless, and it's heartbreaking in a sense. But if I had to kind of find the one bit of DNA in that time, and that time wasn't the only time that I lived like this, because then I, in that, what have I got here? God, I mean, I remember one freshers. Oh my God, I was DJing on a freshers night at the beginning of year 2. Can you believe this? I'm going out with this girl. I've had a fling with this other girl. There's a bit of argy-bargy there. I'm playing the thing of not playing it like in a sin. I wasn't like, it wasn't like Love Island. I wasn't being, all that. No, but what I was doing was, where I wasn't being honest with them, was where I wasn't being honest with me, which was I wanted them both completely. And I wanted them to want me completely. And I didn't want to let them go. And I didn't, so I didn't know how to enact, and so drink just meant that, oh my God, so I had that going on. And then, because I'm DJing and the big ego comes in, biggest piece of shit at the center of the universe, and I'm doing my DJ thing, and this young woman comes up to me, we're dancing together, and she's like, oh, can you play this? And she's got this beautiful dress on, and she unzips the top, and then and then I can't be found. I've literally left the decks, and where is he? He's with her. And then all I remember of that night towards the end was there was a flooded toilet in the university building, because I'd been in the toilet with my first girlfriend, kissing her, and we'd broken the toilet. I mean, what a mess. What a mess. What a mess. Now, of course, so much of this kind of stuff is the hijinks of youth. It's the hijinks of college. It's not unusual. And I think this is where we then touch upon and reach into how dangerous alcohol is. And, less drugs around that time, though ecstasy was a big thing for our generation. Lots of drink around that time. But I think, because we characterize that time as, oh, that's the time where you have fun and you do all this kind of malarkey, it's just like it's dismissed. But I now, as a recovering alcoholic addict of 20 years nearly, I look back, and all of everything that then re-mushroomed and blew up and exploded in my 20s all the way up to my early 30s, right into the beginning of my relationship with Nadia, an inability to be on my own. I remember Nadia calling me very early on, when were we together, weren't we together, where have you been, you were out too late, this isn't the kind of relationship I want, what's going on there, and all that kind of malarkey. That all blew up again, and baked into that behavior right back there at university was all that stuff, was all this stuff, was all of that kind of a huge ache for connection, actually, which is why when I look back at it, and I'm not being harsh on myself now, take it from the perspective of the women I was involved with, I could argue with all of them. I never said that I wasn't this kind of person. It was always obvious. I couldn't lie. I never could lie. It was always obvious what I was doing. Even when the most meaningful relationship I had in later life, and I'd had an affair and it came out, and again, I'd been drinking and a photograph had been taken, and then I was confronted and I had family and it was just awful. All those awful things. I could have tried to lie my way out of it. Friends, colleagues said, oh, you didn't need to admit it. There was nothing that culpable in what she'd seen. I couldn't. I just couldn't. I did it. And obviously I did lie by not saying anything. But when crunch time came, I couldn't. All of these disasters, and the reason I've put sex, drugs, drink, and rock and roll is that all of the, so Lucy, someone was asking, what was the final thing? I talked last week about dangerous behavior and rock bottoms. Drink driving was a massive one for me. But it was the knowledge that alcohol was taking me into dark, irresponsible places. I can think of 2 or 3 very lovely women that I was with for, say, longer than just a fling in that sort of, in my 20s and before I met Nads. And I have my heart goes out to them both. Well, yeah, 2 of them, 3 of them, who they could see that I wasn't a bad person, but they could see that I was out of control. And they, for themselves, had to step back from things. And I was so wired and plugged into so many contrary kind of relationships. I was at that point breaking hearts because I was asking of everyone, be with me for everything, commit to me, be with me. And then I would be somewhere else, and because I'd got drink in me, I'd be the same with the other person. And then of course sometimes they would know each other and they'd say it to each other, and I'd be like, well, he's been saying that to me. This kind of behavior drink does. And what you have to do when you get sober, you have to dig into, why was I doing that? Why was that happening? What was I after? I was after something. I couldn't go home on my own. I couldn't be on my own at night. It was a pathological fear of rejection and loneliness, and a fear that, and the irony is of all those things, if I'd just not had a drink and gone home, I'd have read a book. Do you know what I mean? Lee Durrant, drink and drugs made me feel untouchable, like I could take on the world. What an idiot. Well, that kind of, what's it called when you feel supercharged? What's it called? I loved it. I worked with a guy, the filmmaker in Miami, super pumped, the Americans say. There's nothing more sort of enticing than the idea of being super pumped. But unfortunately, there's nothing more, and there's all of these adjectives to describe it: exhausting, frightening, cringe-making, or boring for those around you, Lee. And I'm not saying that's what you were when you're like that, because everyone knows. I mean, it's that weird thing of, I can have a bipolar manic episode and there can be that fear with everyone, where's he going to go down? Well, imagine that on drink. And that, now I've discovered in retrospect that I had all those bipolar dips and highs and lows going on, and I was managing them and manipulating them with alcohol, and I was shoveling cocaine up my bloody nostrils. What an absolute mess. So it meant, and you're right to say that, Lee, it meant that I could be, and I'm saying this objectively, I could be incredibly, when I say intoxicating, I don't mean in a sophisticated way. I would drive the agenda with such gusto that people were like, fucking hell, we could end up in fucking Auckland, New Zealand tonight. It takes 26 hours to get there, but we'll be there in 3. That's the night with Mark. And many people have often said to me since, oh my God, it would have been so cool to get drunk with you. And, I have an attitude to alcohol, which is like, well, yeah, it would have been back then, when it was protected within that time capsule, but as long as it didn't reach beyond it. So I know for a fact, if I drank now, I'd be out, not carousing and looking for anything, because I've got everything I want from my relationship here, but I know that I would end up looking for more, because the drink opens that yawning desire and need. And so that's another reason you don't drink. You could argue, well, that's one of the many reasons you don't drink. What are the many reasons that keep you from drinking? You don't want your children to be embarrassed and traumatized and scared. You don't want them to be worried about where you are, what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and all that kind of stuff. Likewise, you don't for your wife. Likewise, you don't for your friends and your family. That's why I always say I'm really, really grateful that my mum stopped drinking even at her age, because, of course, there's that worry of being her only child. You know, you don't want to create that worry. Do you know what I mean? And I've just got further notes here. I would drink and drink and drink and drink until I ended up kissing someone. I mean, I was notorious. It was just awful. But not notorious in a kind of, it was always in, I was the one who was, I can't remember at some, my God, it's just come back to me, being at some big ITV do, this won't have been long, I think Nads was probably doing the first series of Loose, going to the pub, and then I was sat on some very nice woman's lap who I was working with, and it all kicked off, and everyone, I mean, this was, the weird thing was, this was pre-filming I mean, thank God. The Instagram reels there would have been of me just jumping around all over the place, dancing and kissing and awful, awful. But all of it in pursuit of finding something to complete me. The feeling of lack, the feeling of not having that vital connection, the feeling or the inability to trust. And of course, what ends up kicking in, and this is a major part of all addiction. Again, I don't know if you're still here, Tim, but the thing that creeps into addiction is when your moral compass goes, you puncture your value system. And when you puncture your own value system, that becomes very dangerous, because then what happens is you start to think you're not worthy or worth that moral. And when I say moral, I don't, this is, you've got to be careful about this, because you're talking about whose morals. I'm not talking about the Daily Mail's morals. I'm not talking about religious morals, but there are certain morals. If you don't hurt other people, you don't take advantage of other people, you don't make people feel uneasy, or you know what I mean, all those kind of things. And if you're in a relationship, you don't go around just kissing people or snogging them or sleeping with them, because that night you drank so much, you opened the portal to, poor me, I feel so lost and lonely, and I'm not getting what I need from my relationship. Oh, well, fuck off. Just don't drink. Do you know what I mean? And so when your moral sort of bubble or your moral compass goes, it's really hard to get it back. And one of the net effects of that, and I think this is why I struggled with jealousy, we've talked a lot about it in our podcast. I think the reason jealousy reared its ugly head for me, actually a lot more in sobriety, was because I knew where I'd taken myself to. And so I couldn't trust. That's why I found that I couldn't trust that when other people were saying something, Nads would say, I'm going out to get drunk, and she couldn't say that anyway, and she wasn't like that, but if she was going out on a big night out or whatever, I couldn't comprehend that wouldn't result in some kind of romantic something, because that's what it always did for me, or that's how I always approached it. It's that classic jealous controlling behavior, which comes with alcoholism, comes with addiction. You fuck up your own value system, and then you end up projecting what you're doing onto other people. And at the moment that you want to stop and you want to rein it in, because you're thinking, oh my God, I need to change things, and I hear that the things have to change, then you start to go, oh my God, but what if other people are just doing what I'm doing? What if they're at the stage I was at? So shooting your moral compass, and that's where I think sex is a really invidious part of the whole drinking, drugging, or doing too much of it. And I'm talking to those of you, anyone who watches this, if you're just, you might not be an alcoholic, but very well, I hit it all the time. But highly, was it a high functioning? I mean, I hate that phrase. It suggests I'm not saying it myself, but highly functioning insofar as when I went into rehab, everyone was like, "What? Really? You went into rehab?" Rebecca Lane, what was drinking like when you met Nadia, and what was your drinking like together? We drank like a pair of absolute lunatics. I mean, we got together, our tryst, if you like, was part of that narrative of promiscuous nonsense on my side, not on her side. But I mean, and so she came in on that, and I couldn't. And then it was like, oh no, I've met someone who I actually really quite like I'd met, the mother of my other children, and it was like, oh no, I want this, I want this to work. I want this to work. And I do think it's a difficult thing to say this, and it's probably an inaccurate, and not inaccurate, because it is accurate, it's what I feel. If again, your children are sent in important ways to try and, you have a responsibility. And I will never not say I didn't stop for my children, because I did. I stopped for my children and I stopped for my wife. I wish I'd stopped for other relationships that I was in, but I also know, looking back, that at the age I was at and other aspects of those relationships, they weren't the right relationships necessarily for me or for them anyway. And it's just tragic and I hold my hand on my chest. And would make amends if making amends wasn't distressing to that, not distressing, but wouldn't, upset the apple cart. But I acknowledge that, my behavior hurt people. And I think another huge part of doing 12-step, any 12-step recovery, program, is you have to acknowledge. And the making amends thing we can talk about, because I think some people get confused on that, which is like phone everyone up and just say sorry. You've got to walk the walk and talk the talk and feel it. And sometimes you can walk the walk, talk the talk and feel it and not actually contact them, but actually, because that's actually the right thing to do. It's like sometimes with certain scenarios, I've got one in my life where you have to, sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do, because you can read the situation for what it is. And so it's quite, things, the most obvious decisions to make aren't always necessarily the ones that look the most normal or mainstream, if you like. So yeah. Tiggy, do you ever wonder if you were influenced by the films and music you were into? I definitely think I was, thinking it was cool to be wild. Yes, I think that's a really good point. I think the music, I struggle with listening to music now, Tiggy. I have to be in a very sort of strong place. If you look at my Instagram account, you'll see me do stupid dances every now and then. And that's usually a sort of spillover of me having had a bit of a manic kind of, not euphoric recall, but flashback. Yeah. I struggle to be able to enjoy all of that stuff still now without thinking it was an accompaniment or the soundtrack of that life. I mean, yeah, if I think back, I had a crazy night when Channel 5 first started making a film, going out clubbing with a mini cam attached to my hand, recreating the Prodigy video, Smack My Bitch Up. Now, think about that. If anyone knows the Smack My Bitch Up video, it was a very colourful night, which was filmed. It's in the loft somewhere. Drinking, carousing, dancing in dancing cages with women. And, not just the music was great, but the camera was great. I was younger, I looked better, had bleached it. Do you know what I mean? It was an incredible, the whole thing was incredibly sort of, what's the word, not arousing, but sort of enticing and exciting. But it's just interesting. And I just think, think about your own drinking. If you're coming out of dry January, going into February, and you think, you got to go big, spare a thought, if you're the drinker, for all of those people around you, if say you're in a relationship or you've got kids. How have they, rather than just, the thing about the thing about the addict is they're very selfish. Don't just be thinking about how dry January has served you. I feel better. I've got a bit of money in my wallet. Oh, yeah, but I've got here now. But how has the family been with you? Have they enjoyed? Also, the other weird thing is you might have got to the end of dry January, but if you've got to the end of dry January, white knuckling like a nutter, you've been the most miserable bastard for the whole month. You've snapped everyone's head off, and everyone secretly is at home going, fucking hell, when's dad or he or she going to have a drink again? That in itself isn't a reason to just return to drinking, because of course this is one of those weird moments. And I remember the first time I tried to get sober without rehab and without 12-step recovery and understanding what relapse meant. The first time I tried to get sober, I remember me saying the same thing, Nadia saying the same, people saying the same thing. Well, you're a bit of a pain, why don't you have a drink? And of course you have a drink, and there's that, and that is brilliant. That is brilliant for the addict. It's like, yeah, of course I can drink, because me not drinking is a nightmare. That's the only way I'll be if I don't drink. Myth number one. And okay, I don't work the program of the 12-step recovery as much. I don't go to AA as much as I should, as much as I used to. I used it so much, Tim. I don't know if it's the same for you when you first got sober. I used it. 100 regular meetings, sharing, commitments, all that kind of stuff. Sponsors, free sponsors, move through the sponsors. And, and I take so much from it, and I know it's there. It's really nice for me knowing it's always there. But doing this, talking like this is a huge help too. So I hope that some of that was some of that helpful. I hope some of that was helpful. I think, what happens to you when you drink in the department of being flirty, being amorous, being physical, being unfaithful? Does it happen a lot? If it happens a lot, yes, it could be a sign of two things. It could be that maybe you could be in the wrong relationship if it keeps happening, but also more, I think we feel that we test drive relationships and move out of them very quickly. There was a great young woman talking on Instagram somewhere about all this kind of polyamory and all this kind of stuff that's going on. Hang on, we haven't really thought about how can we make monogamy work better? How can we not make it so strict and severe and all this kind of stuff? How can we have a better approach to monogamy before we just get impatient and move on to polyamory? I do think we get impatient too quickly, and I think we drink too much, and it's easy for the drinker who's got a drink problem to go, well, I'm only drinking this much because I'm really unhappy, and it doesn't mean you're not unhappy. It could mean that you're unhappy. But perhaps try that relationship without drinking for a bit, or with some help. If you've done dry January, you are now relieved you can have a drink and you're more fun to be around for the family because you're not white knuckling like a psycho. Then I would suggest that maybe you still, have a talk to other people who are getting sober, or try and reduce your alcohol intake. Or when you haven't had a drink on a particular day, go to an AA meeting, or listen to something like this and just interrogate. It's about interrogating the patterns of your behaviour. Anyway, I hope that's good. Lee Doran, did it take you? Where have you gone? Oh, it's gone. Lucy Kitson, I wonder how long dry January has been a thing. I don't think it's not been that long. 12 years, is it? I think. Rebecca Lane, what was drinking like when you met Nadia, and what was your drinking like together? I think I said it was absolutely crazy, insane. Academically did very well. Well, academically, though, I was nearly thrown out of college in my second year, which is telling, and then I just doubled down like an addict. It's like adjusting and refocusing your addictive genes to other ends. Anyway, there you go. Thanks, Lucy. So, yeah, have a think about your drinking, have a think about your sexing, have a think about your drugging. And don't forget the other thing, you think you're really attractive when you're drink and high. More often than not, you're not. The only reason you might, say, meet someone and hit it off with them is because they're equally drunk and high, and neither of you really know that it could see the wood for the trees. No pun intended. Anyway, guys, have a safe evening. Love you lots, and see you tomorrow on Friday.